Gentleman yields. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Garbarino, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Begg, for coming here today. 2024 was a record-setting year for the New York City Housing Authority, but it was just for the right reason. In February of 2024, 70 NYCHA current and former superintendents and staff were arrested for allegedly pocketing bribes in exchange for granting no-bid or micro-contract repair work. This 10-year, $2 million classic pay-for-play corruption scheme was the largest number of federal bribery arrests brought in a single day in DOJ history and included public housing employees at developments in every borough. The employees had the power to hand out smaller micro-purchase contracts of $5,000, which increased to $10,000 after 2019, that fell below the amounts that triggered competitive bidding. The contractors would then pay kickbacks to NYCHA employees who awarded the contract. Mr. Begg, following this incident, your office released a report examining NYCHA's findings. Its mitigation processes are largely reactionary. NYCHA is the largest public housing authority in the United States, correct?
That's correct.
And NYCHA receives billions in federal funding from HUD each year?
I believe over $3 billion.
In fact, NYCHA receives over 25% of HUD's rental assistance funding nationwide.
Correct.
Yet the report found that NYCHA did not assess fraud risks across the entire organization. In fact, NYCHA did not develop a process to identify fraud risks. It did not develop a response plan, and it did not implement a process to monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of fraud risk management activities. As the largest public housing authority in the United States, one would hope that they would be more organized or better organized. Mr. Begg, I understand that it varies amongst housing authorities. I worked at a law firm before I came to Congress that represented a housing authority. We did not have this problem. But I would say that, would you venture to say that these failures are common across other public housing authorities?
I would. And with respect to NYCHA, it's a sophisticated organization. They have many things that are in place. They have a lot of anti-fraud activities that are happening across their programs. They're just not structured in a way that's coordinated across the organization and proactive. And so in many instances, they're actually farther along than most housing authorities. They're leading the pack, but they still have room to go. So we do think that these issues are very pervasive at other housing authorities.
That's kind of scary that you said that they're further along than other housing authorities, but this is still happening. Still happening there. It just happened last year. What can HUD do to provide more guidance when it comes to mitigating public housing authority fraud risk?
Well, first, they need to assess the risks in each of the programs that housing authorities operate. HUD needs to do that and identify what it sees fraud risks as, and then require housing authorities to have anti-fraud programs that meet the standards that GAO's established for federal programs, and then give them guidance on how to meet those expectations and work with them to strengthen those anti-fraud controls over time.
Do the fraud risks vary by size of a housing authority, or like is it if they do an assessment, does one cover NYCHA all the way down to a small town housing authority, or how does
they do vary depending on the size, and we recommended in that report that PIH assess fraud risks at large housing authorities like NYCHA. The no-bid contracts that you mentioned, in a large organization where there are many of them happening all the time, it is hard to oversee low-dollar contracts. But if you're in a small housing authority that may have only a handful of people, you're not going to have that kind of traffic. At the smaller housing authorities, the issues are usually a lack of segregation of duties. One person controls the money and the accounting, and so there's no one to know whether it's gone missing.
And so it sounds like a lack of formal guidance is a factor in lack of formal guidance from HUD is a factor in this risk of fraud. How often does HUD terminate or suspend funding due to underperformance or fraudulent activity?
I don't have the answer to that off the top of my head. Be happy to get back to you on that.
And my last question. Public housing authorities have a governance structure. Should there be reforms or the makeup of those boards that could result in a more competent or effective board?
I think that depends on the context in terms of governance, but I know that governance structures across the PHA space have been a challenge.
I'm out of time. Thank you very much for being here today. I yield back.
Thank you.